Someone just disrespected you. Maybe it was your boss in that meeting. Maybe it was some random person online. Maybe it was someone you thought had your back. And right now, your body is screaming at you to do something about it. Your heart rate spiked. Your jaw clenched. You've already drafted 3 versions of the response in your head. Here's what nobody's telling you. That reaction. That burning need to defend yourself, to clap back, to make them understand they can't talk to you like that. That's not strength. That's you being controlled. And the person who disrespected you, they already know this. They're counting on it. Because the moment you react, the moment you let them see they got under your skin, you've handed them exactly what they wanted. Your attention, your energy, your power. Miyamoto Musashi killed over 60 men in duels before he turned 30. But here's the thing that'll mess with your head. Most of those kills happened before the fight even started. Not because he was faster, not because he was stronger. Because he understood something about human ego that most people spend their entire lives blind to. The person who reacts first has already lost. I'm gonna show you exactly how this works. How disrespect is actually a test you're failing every single time you take the bait. And by the end of this, you're gonna see every insult, every provocation, every attempt to get a rise out of you for what it actually is. A gift. Because Musashi didn't just refuse to react to disrespect. He weaponized his opponent's need for reaction. He turned their ego into the sword that killed them. And once you understand his method, once you actually internalize this, you'll never look at conflict the same way again. But first, you need to understand why you're wired to react in the first place. Because if you don't fix this next part, everything else is useless. Your brain is running ancient software in a modern world. 10,000 years ago, if someone disrespected you in front of the tribe, that was a direct threat to your survival. Your status determined access to resources, mates, protection. Let an insult slide and suddenly you're at the bottom of the hierarchy. Vulnerable, expendable. So evolution hardwired you to respond to disrespect with immediate aggression. Fight back or get pushed out. That software worked perfectly. For a world that doesn't exist anymore. Now, that same wiring is getting you fired, ruining your relationships, keeping you trapped in cycles of pointless conflict with people who don't even matter. You're not defending your honor, you're having a biological tantrum. And Musashi figured this out 400 years ago. He watched samurai after samurai walk into duels angry, offended, ready to prove themselves. And he watched them die, not because they lacked skill, but because anger made them predictable. Ego made them rush. The need to prove something made them abandon strategy for spectacle. Musashi showed up different, stone-faced, silent, unmoved by insults, by provocations, by psychological games his opponents tried to play. And that absence of reaction, that wasn't weakness. That was the fight already won. Let me tell you about the duel with Sasaki Kojiro. This is where Musashi's philosophy becomes crystal clear. Kojiro was famous, a master swordsman known throughout Japan. His technique with the nadachi, the long sword, was considered unbeatable. He'd built his entire reputation on speed and precision. And when Musashi agreed to duel him, Kojiro started talking, sending messages, mocking Musashi's unorthodox style, questioning his lineage, basically doing everything he could to get inside Musashi's head before they even met. Most samurai would have responded, defended their honor, fired back with their own insults. Musashi said nothing. The day of the duel arrives. Kojiro shows up on time to the island where they're set to meet, and he waits and waits. Musashi is late, ridiculously late, hours late. Kojiro is pacing, furious. His students are watching, his reputation is on the line. And this nobody has the audacity to make him wait. By the time Musashi finally shows up, Kojiro isn't thinking about technique anymore. He's not calm, he's not centered, he's reacting. Musashi steps off the boat. He's carved a wooden sword from an oar during the ride over. It's longer than Kojiro's famous blade, crude, unfinished. Kojiro sees this and loses it, throws his sword scabbard on the ground, a symbolic gesture meaning he won't need it because Musashi will die here. And Musashi, still calm, says one sentence, "You've already lost." Because someone who throws away their scabbard has already decided they can't afford to lose. They've made the outcome mean something. Their ego is invested. They need the win. And need makes you desperate. Desperation makes you sloppy. Kojiro attacks first, aggressive, overcommitted. Musashi sidesteps and strikes once. Kojiro's dead before he hits the ground. Musashi puts his wooden sword back in his belt, gets back on the boat, and leaves. No celebration, no gloating, no reaction to the victory either, because reacting to victory is just as dangerous as reacting to disrespect. Both mean you're emotionally invested in external validation. Both mean someone else controls your state. Here's what this means for you right now in your actual life. Every time someone disrespects you, they're testing for control. Not consciously, maybe, but functionally, that's what's happening. They're throwing out bait to see if you'll bite, to see if they can dictate your emotional state, to see if you're the kind of person who can be manipulated through ego, and most people bite immediately. Someone questions your competence in a meeting. You spend the next 10 minutes defending yourself instead of staying on message. Someone posts something shady about you. You drop everything to craft the perfect clapback instead of ignoring them into irrelevance. Someone tries to make you look small in front of others. You escalate instead of letting them hang themselves with their own pettiness. Every single time you think you're standing up for yourself. You're not. You're dancing when they pull the strings. Musashi's trick was simple. He treated disrespect like weather. Rain doesn't care if you're offended by it, it just is. Getting angry at rain doesn't make you powerful, it makes you wet and angry. Disrespect is the same thing, it's just sound waves, words someone said, actions someone took. Your interpretation of it as an attack requiring response. That's optional, that's where your power is, not in the response, in the refusal to be moved. But here's where people mess this up. They think non-reaction means being passive, being a doormat. Letting people walk all over you while you smile and take it. Wrong. Musashi wasn't passive. He was strategic. There's a massive difference between not reacting and not acting. When Kojiro was sending insults before the duel, Musashi wasn't sitting there meditating on inner peace. He was studying his opponent. Gathering information. Watching how Kojiro's ego worked, what buttons could be pushed, how emotional investment affected his decision-making. He was building a psychological profile, so when the fight came, he knew exactly how to win before drawing a weapon. Show up late. Let Kojiro stew in his own frustration. Use a wooden sword to insult his seriousness. Force him to either match the disrespect or look like he's taking it too seriously. Every move designed to amplify Kojiro's need to react. And the moment Kojiro committed emotionally, the fight was over. This is what you need to understand. Non-reaction isn't about being zen. It's about staying in control while your opponent loses theirs. You don't ignore disrespect because you're above it. You ignore it because responding on their terms, in their timing, with their framing, is a losing position. You let them make the first move. You watch what they reveal about themselves, and then you act, not react, from a position of clarity. Let's get tactical because this is where it clicks. Someone insults you at work, publicly, in front of people who matter. Your biology wants you to fire back immediately. Defend. Prove them wrong. Make them look stupid so everyone knows you're not someone to mess with. Don't, because here's what just happened. They've set the frame. They've chosen the battlefield. And if you engage on those terms, even if you win the exchange, you've validated their right to challenge you publicly. You've accepted their frame. Musashi would do something different. He'd acknowledge it so briefly it's almost not an acknowledgement, a slight nod, a neutral, noted. Then he'd continue with what he was doing as if nothing happened. No defense, no counterattack, no emotional investment whatsoever, and watch what happens. The person who threw the insult is now hanging. They've committed to aggression and got nothing back. No fight, no drama, no validation that their attack mattered. They look petty, desperate, like someone taking swings at air. And you look unshakable, because nothing they said changed your behavior, your focus, or your trajectory. That's the power of non-reaction. You make their aggression backfire by refusing to give it what it needs to justify itself. But, and this is crucial, you document it. You note the pattern. You recognize this person as someone who operates through provocation. And later, when it actually matters, when there's a real decision being made about roles or responsibility or trust, you act. Not emotionally, strategically. You don't bring up the insult. You bring up patterns of behavior. You provide evidence of unprofessionalism. You make a business case for why this person shouldn't be in certain positions. You don't fight the battle they chose. You fight the war they didn't see coming. Musashi wrote about this explicitly in the Book of Five Rings. He called it becoming the enemy. It means you have to understand your opponent so completely that you can predict their moves before they make them. You see the fight from their perspective. You know what they want, what they fear, what they'll do under pressure. And once you have that, you don't need to be faster or stronger. You just need to not be where they're swinging. Think about social media for a second. Someone posts something designed to provoke you, a subliminal shot, a vague reference everyone knows is about you. Your first instinct, quote, tweet with a takedown. Show them and everyone watching that you're not someone to test. Musashi would tell you that's exactly what they want. They've turned you into content, made you part of their narrative, and even if you destroy them in the exchange, you've given them your attention, your energy, your time. You've reacted. The Musashi move, don't even acknowledge it exists, not because you're scared, because it's beneath the level you operate on, and here's what kills them. They're sitting there refreshing, waiting for your response, watching to see if they got to you, and nothing comes. Their provocation dies in silence. No engagement, no validation, no proof they affected you at all. And that absence of reaction does more damage to their ego than any comeback ever could. Because what they really wanted wasn't a fight. They wanted confirmation that you see them as a threat, that they matter enough to warrant your response. You just told them, through silence, that they don't. But let's go deeper, because this is where people really struggle. What about when disrespect comes from someone you actually care about? When it's not some random opponent but a friend, a partner, someone whose opinion matters. That's harder, because now your ego is wrapped up in the relationship itself. Musashi would still say the same thing. Don't react, but he'd add something crucial. Don't react immediately. There's a concept in his writings called the void. It's the space between stimulus and response. The gap where most people are controlled by reflex, but warriors maintain choice. Someone you care about says something disrespectful. Your impulse is to defend, explain, or counterattack right away. Instead, pause. Not forever, not to avoid the conversation, but long enough to separate their words from your emotional reaction to their words. Maybe it's 10 seconds, maybe it's 10 hours. The timeline doesn't matter, the separation does. Because once you've created space, you can ask better questions. Is this person actually disrespecting me, or are they expressing something poorly? Is this a pattern, or is this a moment? Is my reaction about what they said, or about something deeper I'm carrying? And then, if action is needed, you act from clarity. You don't fight to win. You communicate to resolve or to establish a boundary that actually means something. You say calmly, without heat, "That comment didn't land well with me. Here's why." And then you watch what they do with that information. If they get defensive, dismiss you, or do it again, you've learned something valuable about who they are, and you can adjust your investment accordingly. If they hear you, apologize, and change the behavior, you've strengthened the relationship by addressing something real instead of letting it fester. Either way, you stayed in control. You acted instead of reacted. That's the separation Musashi mastered, and it's available to you in every single interaction. Here's the part that's gonna make you uncomfortable. Most of the disrespect you experience is invited, not consciously, but through patterns you've established, boundaries you've failed to set, behavior you've tolerated until it became expected. Musashi talks about this in terms of rhythm. Every opponent has a rhythm, a pattern to how they move, think, attack. And if you're getting disrespected repeatedly by the same people or types of people, it's because you've got a rhythm they've learned to exploit. You react predictably. You defend the same insecurities. You tolerate the same boundary violations. And they've learned, maybe without even realizing it, that they can treat you a certain way without real consequences. The fix isn't to blow up bigger next time. It's to change your rhythm entirely. Stop defending. Stop explaining. Stop trying to make them understand why what they did was wrong. Just change the consequence. Someone consistently disrespects you in a friendship. Stop being available. Don't announce it. Don't make it dramatic. Just become mysteriously busy when they reach out. You're not punishing them. You're reallocating your time to people who have earned it. Someone at work keeps taking credit for your contributions. Stop collaborating with them on anything important. Work parallel to them instead of with them. And when questions arise about project success, calmly provide documentation of your role. You're not being petty. You're being strategic about where you invest effort. A partner keeps making jokes at your expense in front of others. Don't laugh it off anymore. Don't argue about it later. Just go quiet when it happens. Let the awkwardness sit. You're not creating drama. You're removing your participation from theirs. This is rhythm disruption. You stop giving them the response they expect, and suddenly their strategy stops working. And here's what's wild. Most of them won't even understand what changed. They'll just sense that something's different, that the dynamic has shifted. That you're not as accessible, not as reactive, not as easy to predict. You've become formless, which is exactly what Musashi advocated. In the Book of Five Rings, Musashi obsesses over the idea of no form. Most fighters have a style, a preference, a way they like to engage. And that preference becomes their weakness because skilled opponents can predict and counter it. Musashi trained himself to have no preference, to be equally comfortable with any weapon, any distance, any tactic, to be water instead of stone. This applies directly to how you handle disrespect. If people know you'll always defend yourself intellectually, they'll attack your intellect. If people know you'll always play it cool, they'll push until they find the thing that breaks your cool. If people know you'll never confront, they'll keep escalating until you snap. Your predictability is your vulnerability. So stop being predictable. Sometimes you ignore disrespect completely. Sometimes you address it calmly. Sometimes you respond with humor that deflates the tension. Sometimes you remove yourself from the situation entirely without explanation. The key is they never know which version of you they're gonna get. Not because you're unstable, but because you're responding to what the situation actually requires instead of what your default programming tells you to do. You're acting strategically instead of reactively. And that unpredictability, that formlessness, is what makes you extremely difficult to manipulate or control. People can't push your buttons if they can't figure out where the buttons are. Let's talk about what happens when you actually master this. When you've trained yourself out of reactive ego and into strategic non-reaction. First, you'll notice that way less disrespect comes your way. Not because people suddenly respect you more out of nowhere, but because you're no longer putting out the signal that you're easy to provoke. Predators, whether physical or social, look for easy targets. People who react predictably. People whose ego is accessible and exploitable. When you stop reacting, you stop looking like prey. You start looking like someone who operates on a different level. Someone who's seen the game and decided it's beneath them. And most people, consciously or not, will stop testing you. Second, the disrespect that does still come your way stops affecting you the same way. It's not that you've become emotionless or that you don't notice it. You absolutely notice it, but it doesn't hook you anymore. It doesn't pull you out of your center. It doesn't make you question yourself or scramble to defend. It's just information, data about who this person is and how they operate, and information is useful. Emotional reactions are expensive. Third, and this is the part nobody tells you, you'll start to feel kinda lonely. Because once you've stepped out of the reaction game, you realize how much of social interaction is just ego combat. People poking at each other, testing, proving, performing. And you're not interested in that anymore. You're not judging it, you're just not participating. Which means shallow relationships start falling away naturally. People who only knew how to relate to you through provocation or drama find you boring now. And that's fine. Great, actually. Because the people who remain, the people who can connect with you outside of ego games, those relationships get deeper. More real. You're not bonding over shared reactions anymore. You're bonding over shared values, shared goals, shared perspectives on what actually matters. Musashi spent the last decades of his life mostly alone, not as a hermit. He had students, he painted, he wrote. But he wasn't in the social mix the way he'd been as a young duelist. Because once you've mastered non-reaction, most social dynamics feel like children playing pretend war. And you've been in actual wars. You know the difference. Here's the practical breakdown, the operating manual. When someone disrespects you, run this sequence. 1. Pause. Don't let your biology hijack you into immediate response. Create the void between stimulus and reaction. Count to 3 if you have to. 2. Assess. Is this person actually important? Does this situation actually matter? Or is this just ego wanting to be defended? Most disrespect comes from people who don't matter in situations that won't be remembered next week. 3. Choose. If action is needed, what's the strategic move? Not the satisfying move, not the defensive move, the move that actually advances your position. Sometimes it's silence, sometimes it's a boundary, sometimes it's complete withdrawal, sometimes, rarely, it's a calculated response designed to end the pattern permanently. 4. Act or don't, but make it intentional, make it clean, and then let it go, don't replay it. Don't share it with 10 people looking for validation that you handled it right. Don't draft better versions of what you should have said. You made the call. Now move forward. This sequence, practiced consistently, will fundamentally change how you move through the world. You'll stop wasting energy on pointless conflicts. Stop giving power to people who don't deserve access to your emotional state. Stop letting your biology run your life. You'll become what Musashi called the warrior who has nothing to prove. And that lack of need for validation, for reaction, for proof that you matter, is the most dangerous thing you can be. Because someone with nothing to prove is someone who can't be controlled. I'm gonna tell you something about Musashi's later years that most people don't focus on. After all the duels, after the fame, after proving himself as maybe the greatest swordsman in Japanese history, he retreated to a cave, wrote the Book of 5 Rings, painted, meditated, and died alone at 62. No epic final battle, no legendary last words. Just a man who'd mastered himself dying quietly because that's what happens when your story ends. People romanticize the duels, the victories, the reputation he built, but Musashi would tell you the real accomplishment wasn't the killing, it was the not killing. The duels he walked away from because they didn't serve a purpose. The provocations he ignored because the person wasn't worth his attention. The disrespect he let slide because his ego wasn't running the show anymore. That's mastery, not the ability to destroy when provoked. The ability to choose destruction or indifference based on what the situation actually requires. And in your life right now, you've got that same choice. You can keep reacting, keep defending, keep proving yourself to people who will never actually respect you anyway, or you can stop. Stop playing the game where disrespect demands response. Stop letting other people's words and actions dictate your emotional state. Stop giving away your power to anyone who's figured out how to push your buttons. You can become formless, strategic, unmoved by provocation. Not because you're weak, but because you've recognized that reaction is the weakness. That control over yourself is the only control that matters. That the person who remains calm while everyone else is losing their minds doesn't just win the immediate conflict. They win the larger game. So here's where you are. Someone's gonna disrespect you today, maybe tomorrow, definitely this week. And you're gonna feel that pull, that biological urge to defend, to attack, to make them see they can't talk to you like that. And in that moment, you'll have a choice. Option 1, you react. You engage on their terms. You give them exactly what they wanted, which is proof that they can affect you. You'll feel temporarily satisfied, like you stood up for yourself. But you'll have just trained them and everyone watching that you're controllable, that you operate from ego, that your buttons are accessible and your reactions are predictable. Option 2, you pause. You remember Musashi carved a wooden sword from an oar while his opponent raged on the beach. You let the disrespect exist in the air without needing to touch it. You watch with detached curiosity as the person who threw it waits for your response. And you give them nothing. No anger, no defense, no acknowledgement that they even registered as a threat. Just silence, or a brief, neutral acknowledgement followed by you continuing exactly what you were doing. And in that moment, you'll have done something most people never do. You'll have controlled yourself instead of being controlled by someone else. You'll have won without fighting, which is what Musashi said was the highest form of victory. And over time, as you practice this, as you choose non-reaction over and over again, something fundamental shifts. You stop being reactive. You stop being available for drama. You stop being an easy target. You become someone who operates from internal validation instead of external need. Someone who can't be manipulated because they don't need to prove anything. Someone who's mastered the thing most people spend their entire lives enslaved to, their own ego. That's the trick Musashi left behind. Not a technique, not a tactic, a fundamental reorientation of how you see conflict itself. And once you see it, once you really internalize that reaction is the trap and non-reaction is the power, you can't go back. You'll watch people spiral into ego combat and you'll just not participate. You'll see the bait and you'll smile because you remember when that used to work on you. You'll feel the pull to defend yourself and you'll recognize it as biology, not truth, and you'll let it pass. And slowly, quietly, without any dramatic transformation, you'll become untouchable. Not because nothing can hurt you, but because you've stopped letting temporary disrespect from temporary people affect your permanent state. That's freedom. That's power. That's what Musashi spent 62 years mastering and what he's handing you right now. The question is whether you're gonna take it. Whether you're gonna practice it the next time someone tests you. Whether you're gonna choose strategic silence over satisfying reaction. Whether you're gonna kill their ego by refusing to feed it with yours. Musashi's been dead for almost 400 years. The disrespect he faced, the duels he fought, the ego battles he won, all of that's ancient history. But the principle, the mechanism, that's sitting in front of you right now, waiting for you to use it. All you gotta do is stop reacting. Everything else follows from there.